Hello! Last time you saw me pre-paint the inside of the hull. So now we are ready to start assembling these panels. First I will need to dry fit everything. And as you can see here, there are some gaps. I put back the bulkheads into the hull to use these as a reference. And check the distance to make it 17.5 centimeters. Thus, I adjust the upper panel to the position of the forward bulkhead. Having fastened the bulkhead, I see that it lines up backwards. The contact with the bulkhead could be improved, so I trace what could be removed to make the fit tighter. And remove some material. Now the fit is better. Also here in the front it looks good enough. Thus I can start preparing the glue. I will use epoxy that I will put some additive into. Pure epoxy is strong as it is. But to make the bond really strong I use cotton fibers. I loosen the dry fit before gluing. The thickened epoxy will stay in the gap rather good. I avoid putting epoxy around the bulkhead screws and the wretched straps. Otherwise I try to get glue into the gap all along the edges, before I press all together. I finish with wiping off the excess and line up the front with some clamps, before I proceed with the aft end. The gaps around the stern gets an extra dab of epoxy. Same procedure here with filling the gaps, before tightening the gaps. The day after I can loosen the straps. And check the result. I remove the temporary bulkheads and the ordinary bulkheads from the hull. Here I need to use a primitive tool to reach far enough. Then I flip over the hull. The gluing is still rather fragile, so I will need to strengthen the seam before I can level the area. I need some strips of glass to put around the seam on the inside, and a taped stick to lay out the glass with. I put some thickened epoxy on first, but run into a problem. When the glove breaks, it's good to have an extra glove under. With a new glove on, I lay down the glass over the seam. As there is a risk of getting epoxy on exposed skin, I take care, working from the inside and outwards. When I do the innermost glassing, I have only glassed the first decimeters. I also keep the hand away from the wet surface, keeping the wet tools inside the hull until the lower part of the stern bulkhead is glassed in, and I can continue outwards to the end. In the front the distance is longer and I need a stick to reach. I wet out the glass strip on a taped stick and stick it far into the front. I use a stick to level out the cloth before I add the next section. Also here I work inside and out to limit the epoxy exposure. When I am this far out I can start working with hands and adjust the cloth until it lays flat. For the last section I can work solely with hands. Having done the flat inside, I also look for flat areas on the outside. Although the outside needs sanding before glassing, it doesn't hurt to strengthen flat areas already now. Thus I put some leftover epoxy onto the hull and lay down some glass on the seam and wet it out. After a couple of hours I'm back to refill the cloth. I use a brush on a stick to reach into the front. And I also refill the cloth on the outside. The day after I flip the hull again. so that I can prepare the other side of the hull and put glass on this seam as well, the whole way out, also in the end. When I have done the inside, I will need to flat out the outside. Thus, in the next episode I will do some sanding before I can proceed. Please join me then.